courtroom was tense, the air thick with murmurs and whispered judgments. Crystal Forbes, a billionaire heiress known for her philanthropy and sharp business mind, sat nervously at the plaintiff's table. Her lawyer had just excused himself, muttering something about scheduling conflicts and too complicated to handle today. Panic crept across her face. I don't understand," she whispered, clutching her designer handbag tightly. "He just left here in front of the judge?" Across the room, a janitor named Eli Turner was quietly sweeping near the back. He had been cleaning the hallways of the courthouse for years, unnoticed and unremarkable in most eyes. Today, however, he couldn't ignore what he saw. The judge, a stern woman with little patience for delays, had already frowned at the empty seat where Crystal's attorney should have been. "Her case is delayed," the judge said, glancing at the file. "Or dismissed if representation is absent. We need counsel present to proceed." Crystal's face drained of color. "No, please. I can't afford to delay this. My company's future depends on this settlement. Someone, anyone, help me." Eli stopped mid-sweep, his eyes narrowing. Something about her desperation struck him, not the wealth, the fame, or the headlines, but the sheer injustice of a person being left alone in a room where her life and livelihood were on the line. Before he could overthink it, Eli took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am. I might be able to help," he said, his voice steady but firm. Crystal looked at him, disbelief etched across her features. "You're a janitor." Eli nodded. "Yes, but I know a thing or two about law and procedure. I've listened to hundreds of cases while cleaning this building. I may not have a license, but I can represent you until proper counsel arrives. I will defend you." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Sir, are you suggesting you act as legal representation without a license?" "I am, Your Honor," Eli said, his eyes meeting hers unflinchingly. "I understand it's unusual, but the alternative is leaving her vulnerable. If you don't allow me to speak, the plaintiff may lose her case simply because her lawyer abandoned her." Crystal blinked, a mix of hope and skepticism. "You really think you can do this?" "I don't think I'd know I can try. I've studied cases, learned the rules, and observed strategy. Today I'll do everything I can to defend you." The judge leaned back, intrigued but cautious. "This is highly irregular. One moment, let me consult briefly." Eli turned to Crystal. "You need to stay calm. I won't let anyone steamroll you. We'll make them listen. Your story deserves to be heard." Crystal's hands trembled, but for the first time since her lawyer had abandoned her, a spark of courage returned. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. Just let me do my job," Eli said simply, sweeping his gaze across the courtroom. "I'll defend you as if your life depended on it, because today, in a way, it does." The judge returned, motioning for silence. "All right. We will allow an emergency temporary representation under these circumstances. Mr. Turner, you may speak on behalf of the plaintiff." Eli straightened, inhaled deeply, and stepped toward the lectern. The murmurs grew louder, people snapping photos and whispering. A janitor in the courtroom, a figure no one expected, was about to challenge wealthy, powerful attorneys with nothing but courage, knowledge, and determination. Crystal gripped the edge of the table, watching him. Her heart pounded, but something about Eli's calm, unwavering presence gave her hope. Today her fate might just be in the hands of a man she barely knew, but whose bravery was undeniable. Eli cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if I may begin?" And with that, the courtroom leaned in. No one had expected a janitor to rise. No one had anticipated that the smallest, most overlooked person in the room would stand as the fiercest defender of a billionaire's rights. Eli Turner's hands rested lightly on the edge of the lectern as he addressed the courtroom. He wasn't a trained attorney, but he had observed enough trials to know the rhythm of legal proceedings. He spoke clearly, deliberately, making each word count. "Your Honor, members of the court, ladies and gentlemen," Eli began, "my client, Miss Forbes, has been wronged, and she is entitled to a fair hearing. While her attorney is absent, I will speak on her behalf not as a licensed lawyer, but as someone who understands the gravity of justice and the importance of truth." A ripple of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Some of the attorneys exchanged incredulous glances, others stifled smirks. Yet the judge leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on," she said curtly. But keep your arguments within the bounds of procedure? Eli nodded, pulled out notes he had hastily prepared during the lull while the lawyer was absent. The contract in question, Your Honor, clearly states the obligations of both parties. My client upheld every term, yet the opposition has ignored these stipulations. Today, I will demonstrate that dismissing her case due to procedural absence would be unjust and contrary to the law. Crystal watched from the table, holding her breath. She couldn't believe the janitor she had barely spoken to yesterday was standing up to seasoned attorneys in a high-stakes trial, and yet, he exuded confidence. Mr. Turner, are you aware that misrepresenting legal counsel can have consequences? One opposing lawyer asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Eli met his gaze steadily. I am aware. Also aware that the alternative allowing my client to be blindsided is worse. I will limit my statements to facts and evidence. He presented the documents Crystal had meticulously gathered, contracts, emails, and correspondence proving her claims. With calm authority, he explained each piece of evidence, citing clauses and referencing prior case law he had studied over the years. The courtroom leaned in. Judge's frown softened slightly as she listened. She had expected fumbling and confusion, yet Eli's delivery was precise, logical, and compelling. Your Honor, Eli continued, it is not wealth, status, or legal representation that guarantees justice. It is truth, evidence, and fairness. To deny my client a hearing because her lawyer failed to appear would be a miscarriage of justice. I ask you to allow her case to proceed. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. People were stunned a janitor had not only held his ground, but had spoken with a conviction and clarity that rivaled trained lawyers. Crystal's pulse raced. She felt a surge of hope she hadn't experienced since the lawyer's abrupt departure. The opposition lawyer sneered. We object. He has no standing. The judge raised her hand. Objection noted. Proceed, Mr. Turner, within your bounds. Eli nodded. Understood, Your Honor. I will stay strictly factual. He continued, walking the jury through the key evidence, connecting each point with clarity and purpose. He asked pointed questions, elicited direct answers from witnesses, and highlighted inconsistencies in the opposing side's testimony. Every word strengthened Crystal's case, and with every passing moment, the courtroom's initial skepticism began to fade. Crystal, watching him work, whispered to herself, I can't believe this. He's incredible. Eli glanced briefly at her, giving a subtle nod. We're not done yet, he whispered under his breath. By the time the morning session ended, the judge had already signaled her approval to continue proceedings with Eli representing Crystal temporarily. Word spread quickly among the courtroom spectators this janitor wasn't just cleaning floors anymore. He was saving a billionaire from losing everything because her own lawyer had abandoned her. The battle had only just begun, but Eli had already proven one undeniable truth. Courage, preparation, and a fierce sense of justice could make even the most overlooked person a powerful defender. The courtroom reconvened after a short lunch break, and the atmosphere had shifted. Attorneys whispered among themselves. Jury members leaned forward in curiosity, and even the judge seemed intrigued by Eli Turner's unorthodox defense. The janitor had earned their attention not through credentials, but through sheer determination and knowledge. Eli returned to the lectern, notes in hand. Your Honor, if I may continue, I will now address the discrepancies in the opposing party's testimony. He called the first witness, a company executive who had signed the contract on behalf of the opposition. With tact and precision, Eli highlighted inconsistencies between the witness's statements and the documented correspondence. Every contradiction he revealed undermined the credibility of the opposing case. Mr. Thompson, Eli said. Why? Can you explain why this email clearly states that my client was entitled to full payment within 30 days, yet you claim otherwise in court? The witness hesitated, shifting nervously under the janitor's unwavering gaze. Please answer clearly, sir. Eli pressed gently but firmly. The email is dated March 3rd. The subject line clearly reads, Payment terms agreed. How do you reconcile that with your statement today? The courtroom murmured. Even seasoned attorneys exchanged glances, impressed with Eli's methodical approach. Crystal's hands tightened around her notes, her heart racing. For the first time that day, she felt a sense of relief. After the witness stepped down, Eli turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence speaks for itself. My client fulfilled her obligations, and any claims of breach are contradicted by the very documents the opposition submitted. Justice requires that her case be heard fully, without delay or dismissal due to absent counsel. The opposition attorney's frustration was evident. He attempted to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand. "Mr. Turner, continue. You are within your bounds." Eli's confidence grew with each passing moment. He guided Crystal through the testimony, reminding her when to speak, how to respond, and when to remain silent. His calm, methodical presence steadied her nerves. He wasn't just representing her, he was giving her the courage to stand up and speak truthfully. By mid-afternoon, the tide had begun to turn. The opposing side's strategy faltered under Eli's precise questioning. He caught inconsistencies, challenged assumptions, and presented evidence in a clear, logical manner. Every step strengthened Crystal's position, and the courtroom could no longer dismiss him as just a janitor attempting a reckless stunt. During a brief recess, Crystal approached him. "Eli, I don't even know how to thank you. You've done more than any lawyer could have done today." Eli smiled, brushing imaginary dust off his uniform. "I'm just here to make sure the truth comes out. That's all anyone can ask for, isn't it?" She shook her head, eyes glistening. "No, you've gone above and beyond. You saved me when everyone else abandoned me." "Just remember," Eli said, "sometimes the right thing doesn't come with a title or a uniform. You stand up because it's right, and that's enough." The afternoon session resumed, and Eli continued his defense. Now moving to cross-examine the opposing side's second witness, legal consultant attempting to discredit Crystal's documents. Eli's questions were sharp, focused, and direct. With each point he made, the credibility of the opposition crumbled further. By the end of the day, the judge called a brief recess and addressed the courtroom. "I will be reviewing today's proceedings carefully. Given the unusual circumstances, this case will continue under Mr. Turner's temporary representation. His arguments are compelling and merit consideration." Crystal exhaled, leaning back in her seat. Relief washed over her, and she realized that the janitor who had seemed invisible just hours ago had transformed into her fiercest advocate. Eli returned to the back of the room to retrieve his cleaning supplies, unnoticed by most, yet he carried a quiet satisfaction. Today had proven that courage, knowledge, and integrity mattered more than appearances or status. One overlooked janitor had changed the course of a billionaire's life, and, perhaps, the way everyone in that courtroom viewed justice. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread that the janitor, Eli Turner, was continuing to represent Crystal Forbes, and curiosity filled every corner. Reporters lingered outside the courthouse, eager to capture the story of the unlikely defender who had taken on a billionaire's case and held his ground against seasoned lawyers. Eli arrived early, as always, pushing his mop and bucket quietly to the back of the room. Crystal approached him, a look of gratitude on her face. "Eli, I can't believe we're here again. I don't know what I'd do without you." Eli gave a modest shrug. "We'll get through this, one step at a time. Stay focused, speak the truth, and we'll handle the rest." The session began with the opposition presenting their strongest arguments yet, hoping to overwhelm the temporary representation. But Eli was ready. He had studied every document, memorized every clause, and anticipated every potential attack. With unwavering calm, he countered each point, drawing attention to the contradictions and errors in their claims. "Your Honor," Eli said, pointing to a printed contract, "the clause clearly stipulates that my client fulfilled all her obligations. Any claim of breach is not only unfounded but contradicted by the very evidence the opposition provided. Justice cannot ignore these facts simply because my client's lawyer was absent yesterday." The judge leaned forward, clearly impressed. "Mr. Turner, your arguments are concise and substantiated. Proceed." Crystal followed Eli's guidance, answering questions truthfully and confidently. The courtroom, which had been skeptical at first, began to recognize the undeniable strength of her position and the extraordinary role Eli was playing. During a pivotal moment, Eli called in a financial analyst who had examined Crystal's business records. With calm authority, Eli questioned the analyst, highlighting key figures and timelines that reinforced Crystal's claims. The opposition struggled to respond, their objections faltering under the clarity and precision of Eli's cross-examination. By mid-afternoon, the courtroom had shifted from doubt to admiration. Witnesses testified clearly, documents were scrutinized and validated, and Eli's dedication never wavered. Each act of preparation and courage had turned a desperate situation into a display of justice in action. Finally, the The judge addressed the courtroom. After reviewing the arguments and evidence presented, it is clear that Ms. Forbes' case is valid and substantiated. While representation was initially absent, Mr. Turner's intervention has ensured that justice is served today. This court will proceed accordingly. Crystal exhaled deeply, relief washing over her like a tidal wave. She turned to Eli, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't even have words, Eli. You saved me. You stood up when no one else would. I owe you everything." Eli shook his head, brushing imaginary dust from his uniform once more. "No, you don't owe me anything. I just did what was right." Justice should never depend on wealth, status, or luck. It should depend on truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Eli and Crystal. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment when the janitor who had quietly swept the halls now stood as a hero who had defended a billionaire. Headlines the next day would read, "Janitor saves billionaire in court after lawyer abandons her." Crystal, holding her child's hand, smiled at Eli. "I want you to know, this isn't the end. I want you involved in my philanthropic work. Someone with integrity and courage like yours shouldn't be overlooked." Eli felt a mixture of humility and pride. "I'll consider it," he said with a small smile. "But for now, I'm just glad the right thing was done." That evening, Eli returned to his usual routine, mopping the courthouse floors. The halls felt different now. People nodded, smiled, and whispered in admiration. He had learned a powerful truth. Courage, knowledge, and compassion could turn even the most ordinary person into a defender of justice. And Crystal should learn that heroes sometimes come in the most unexpected forms. A janitor who refused to ignore injustice. A man who stood tall when everyone else turned away. And someone who reminded the world that doing what's right is always worth it. The day ended not with fame or accolades, but with a quiet understanding. Integrity, courage, and the willingness to act can change lives, sometimes even the life of a billionaire.